Happy Tuesday, everyone. It is a beautiful day in Toronto where it was. It was just like summer again, and I was really, really happy. And apparently it's going to be just like summer tomorrow too. And then it's going to be winter because we're in Canada. So enjoy the weather while it lasts. If you're here, I certainly did today. And yeah, man, what a difference it makes when the sun is shining and it's warm. For those of you who know me, you know me. But for those of you who don't, I'll just give a little bit of background. My name is Janey Brown, and I'm a professional singer. I've been entertaining for 25 years. I know that's a big number. Hopefully it's not revealing my age or anything, but been performing a long time. And throughout that performance career, man, I had some serious struggles, some serious battles with mental health and the inner critic and self-doubt and stage fright and all of that stuff. And eventually, parallel to my performance career, I was also a coach for many years. That's a little less time. That's about a 15-year career rather than a 25-year one. But eventually, like a decade into my wellness career, I realized that maybe the best thing to do would be to blend my careers, my performance career and my wellness career. And what I did was I started to focus on how to support basically anyone that wants to be in front of an audience. So entertainers, speakers, really the work that I do can apply to anyone, even just if you're doing something as simple, which isn't really simple, but as simple as asking someone on a date. Asking someone on a date is scary. It takes courage. It's its own type of performance. So anyway, my work is about helping people manage their mental health, helping people build confidence, no matter what it is they're performing to. And some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about tonight is directly from my Fear to Fierce program from Fierce Academy. And there's a lot in what we're going to talk about tonight, that a lot of themes that occur throughout the program. So thanks for joining tonight. Really excited to have this conversation. This conversation is very near and dear to me. And it's an important one for not only for mental health, but to just function. So the topic tonight is reframing our mindset. And this is a sort of like a buzzword that has been floating around the industry for a while now. It's sometimes used totally spot on, and other times it's there can be a lot of misunderstandings with it. So I wanted to talk about what reframing is, talk about how it's sort of misused, talk about how you can use it properly to enhance your mental health and to increase your ability to perform mentally. So let's first talk about what it is. Essentially, the idea when you reframe your mindset is that you shift your beliefs or your thinking patterns, or your tendency to, let's just say your beliefs and your thinking patterns. It's essentially shifting those things from something that's less ideal to more ideal. I know that's a really broad explanation, but an example would be if you had a negative belief about yourself and you wanted to change it, you would work to reframe your mindset or your belief about yourself so that you had a new one that was positive. So it's a really simple concept. Reframing your mindset is pretty much exactly as it sounds. But there's misconceptions because although the concept itself is simple, seemingly, it's not necessarily easy to adopt. And I think that we have to really watch our expectations around what it means to reframe our mindset. So I want to talk about some expectations. So one of the expectations I just mentioned, just because reframing your mindset is a simple concept, it doesn't mean it's simple to adopt. And not only that, but when we logically understand how to reframe our mindset, it doesn't actually mean that the mindset itself is shifted. So let's say we become aware of a negative belief that we have about ourselves and we figure out how to change that belief. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that the belief itself is changed. It can be a little bit trickier than that, and we need to oftentimes work diligently to change our belief systems, especially when it comes to our belief system about ourselves, because we've been forming beliefs about ourselves since the beginning of time, since became a human. So that tendency, whatever we're believing about ourselves, that tendency is age old within us. So just because we logically understand doesn't mean we know. There's this phrase in the trauma field, I understand, but I do not know, or I know, but I do not feel. That's the distinction we're trying to make here when we talk about actual reframing of the mindset. So the next thing is that once we figure it out once, so let's say we understand how to shift our mindset, we can feel it in our body, like we feel it in our bones that this belief inside of us has changed. Well, that doesn't mean it's going to be that way the next time. You might have to go through an entire process again to shift your belief again, so that the next time you have that belief or that thought that comes up in your mind, you have to work all over again to change it and shift it. So there's some challenges with mindset reframing, but I believe that those challenges are actually more lie within our expectations rather than it being super difficult to reframe the mindset. I think we just have to really check our expectations. So we're going to talk about the reality of what it can take to shift a mindset and in what contexts in a little bit. But I just wanted to kind of review some some false beliefs around that. Mental health education here for just a quick second. Depression isn't a mindset shift. Anxiety isn't a mindset shift. Traumatic flashbacks aren't mindset shifts, meaning those three things that I just listed can't necessarily be managed or catered to with a simple reframes or simple like positive affirmations, let's say. These are long-term sort of things that we have to work on. And I will get a little bit further into that as we go along. So here's a one-liner for you that I want you to take away with you forever. It's probably the greatest mental health hack that I've ever come across, and that is that there is no mental health hack. Mental health is a process. Mental health is a long-term journey. It takes consistency. It takes resilience. It takes facing fears and courage and a lot of failure and an ability to forgive oneself for those failures. So mental health hack of the day, there is no mental health hack. It's about consistency and facing fears and doing the hard work. So the expectations of mindset reframing and how easy it must be and sort of like, oh, all you have to do is shift your thought. That sort of belief can lead to what is known as toxic positivity. And so just to review that, essentially, toxic positivity can show up in many different ways, but essentially it's this tendency to sort of acquire good vibes only in one's life. There's nothing wrong with acquiring good vibes or like striving for good vibes. I certainly do that. But if that's all you're striving for and your expectation is that you can actually achieve that, no, not only is that not realistic, but it's totally unhealthy. And it's going to backfire. If you are surrounding yourself with human beings who are grounded and who are touched down with reality, they're not going to like you very much after a certain amount of toxic positivity coming from you. Just sort of this constant, incessant need of yours to fix or change or heal faster or make better for yourself or them. So toxic positivity is, like I said, it's just this tendency to sort of force or be obtrusive with positivity and positive outlooks all the time. I am a huge advocate for positivity and a huge advocate for positive outlooks, but there's sort of a way to go about it that's effective and a way to go about it that's not effective. This brings me to the just remembering the topic of positive affirmations. Positive affirmations can be useful, but in limited contexts. Positive affirmations have the tendency to cause us to quite literally put our blinders on, plug our ears, and kind of go, I am brave, I am strong, I am great, I'm all these things, I can do this. In certain contexts, that's useful. For example, if you're about to step on stage, there's really no more preparation you can do before you're about to step on stage. Saying to yourself, I'm going to do great and I'm awesome and I'm brave, totally positive. Saying those things to yourself before going into surgery is another context that positive affirmations can be useful. Or going into a sports game, or giving a speech, or going into surgery. I think I might have said that, but going into surgery, or having suicidal thoughts. That's another subject that we'll set aside for this moment. But positive affirmations can be useful, but when they're not useful is kind of all the other times I didn't list. So kind of every other time in life. If you're having an emotion and you're having an experience and you're trying to positively affirm your way out of that, what you're doing is you're just negating your own experience and negating your own feelings. Another thing to consider is that positive affirmations themselves they're not meant to like fill you with happiness. Positive affirmations, the root of them is it's really just to shift your mind into a solutions-driven, sort of optimistic, focused lane rather than a negative spiral, which in high-stress situations, like before going on stage or going into surgery, can absolutely occur. So you can combat your negative beliefs and your negative mindset with positive affirmation in certain contexts, which I just listed. But for the most part, they're sort of they sort of cause you to ignore what you're truly feeling and what your true experience is, and they don't allow you to really find coping mechanisms for those things if you're ignoring them and sort of putting your blinders on and plugging your ears to them. So positive affirmations can at times show up under the category of toxic positivity. That's, I think, all I'll say about that. Toxic positivity can come from ourselves to ourselves. It can come from others. I think, in certain ways, it's well-intentioned, right? Like people that are, if you're discussing a problem with someone, or you're showing that you're down, or like that you're not just like your perky self that day, people's tendency to offer advice and encourage you to shift your mindset and sort of like, this is all you have to do, right? Their sort of tendency to give you advice on things that potentially they have no understanding about because they're not you. It's coming from a well-intentioned place a lot of the time, especially if they're loved ones. They're not trying to hurt you. They're not trying to negate your experience. They're just trying to help you feel better. But oftentimes what happens is they actually do negate your experience, and it comes across as them just trying to fix you rather than them really showing up and being present and listening and showing compassion. So it's just things to be aware of, right? Like human tendency is to try and fix and, I've cracked the code. Here's what you got to do. But the problem, as I've mentioned, is it negates people's experiences. And with our own ego is sometimes what happens when we offer advice and, it's this simple piece of advice, super logical to understand, yet we're failing to remember that understanding and knowing in your body are two different things, and they take different processes to get there. But yeah, what we fail to recognize is that, but also that like our answer for what we would do for us is not necessarily the answer for what someone else needs to do. So we have to watch, how much advice we give, and what. Thanks, Warren, for the 100%. Yeah, we have to watch what advice we give to others so that we're not, making them feel like they're being left in the dust. Sometimes people just need you to sit at the bottom of the well with them and hear them, and know that you're not going to leave them just because they're not their perky self, or just because they're struggling with depression, which is obviously more serious than not being perky. So yeah, these are things to remember about toxic positivity. Another thing that I want to just go back to, I started this session off by talking about like what reframing your mindset is, and sort of where we go wrong is our misconceptions and our expectations around what it takes to reframe our mindset. So one of the narratives that's happening right now in the wellness industry, I'm just seeing it a ton from motivational speakers and whatnot, is that like we have a choice. You know, what happens to you is not necessarily your choice, but how you process it is your choice. This is the narrative. That is true and untrue. And it really, really depends on the person. Someone could be processing an experience that happened to them based on prior trauma that was compiled in them. When we have the experience of trauma, it changes our nervous system and it changes the way that we perceive future experiences that emulate that trauma or that like trigger that trauma in different ways. It's almost like we're seeing the world through a lens, a different lens. So for someone to say, you know, experiences that happen in life, like let's say not traumatic experiences, just regular experiences that happen in life that are, you know, not ideal, that's not in our control, but what's in our control is how we frame those experiences in our mind or how we, you know, interpret them. And yeah, I'm here to say that that's just not true. There's more to the story. And I'm just going to break down a little bit of science here. And if you have questions, please just mention in the comment what's confusing or what you want to know more about, or add your thoughts. I'm super, super pumped about your thoughts too. But from a neuroscience standpoint, at a transduction level, okay, so when one of our when our proprioceptors and our sense receptors are intaking information at a transduction level, like when the brain is taking in that processing, whether it be the processing of light or sound waves or whatever, taste, olfactory, smell, when our brain is processing that information, it's definitely happening at an unconscious level. Like we're not telling our brain how to process light and smell. Okay. So right then and there at a transduction level, how we're intaking stimuli is not our choice, as the narrative about reframing our mindset suggests. Now, once that stimuli is processed, it then moves down to sort of this past the perception level into the interpretation level. So we then use our logic to interpret the stimuli that we've processed at like a neural level. That phase right there is where I'm saying that sometimes we do have the ability to reframe our mindset and sometimes we don't. And the times that we don't, the times that we're not able to perceive this, this stimuli in an ideal way and like quickly reframe our mindset around, the event that happened that left us feeling X way. In those experiences, it's often because the belief itself is too deep. We've had this everlasting belief that has, like I said before, kind of been instilled in us since the beginning of time in our childhood. And the event occurs and how we process it is connected to this like deep root belief that has been with us for a while. And so that's why it's not really that easy to just be like, okay, I'm going to change my belief because I logically understand how I could change my belief. So I'm going to get into how we can start to chip away at these deeper beliefs and approach this reframing, this mindset reframing thing a little bit differently than, a simple affirmation to make us feel better for a second. So I'm going to use the example of struggling with self-doubt and the inner critic to talk about reframing. I first want to say that, in Fierce Academy, I give this tool called the TrifectA. It's 3 actionable A's that you can utilize to essentially approach any change in your life. So I'm going to discuss those because they're important for the next part, which is a CBT exercise from psychology. It's definitely not something I came up with. So, but the trifecta. So in order to change anything, you have to become aware of it, right? So awareness is the first step to change, which is obviously the first step to reframing your mindset. We can't change what we can't see. If we can't see that our mind and our thoughts are being inundated by our inner critic and our self-doubt, then we can't change that, which is just going to run rampant in our unconscious. So the first step to any change is awareness, and we can acquire awareness through exercises like mindfulness. Mindfulness is amazing, and there's so many different types of exercises out there. I definitely offer a few in my Fear to Fierce program, and I have some just blatantly online for free that if you check in with me after, I can certainly send to you. But yeah, mindfulness is awesome because the practice of it, essentially, it's becoming aware of your physical, emotional, and mental dispositions. And you do that purposefully. You do that intentionally. You like sit down and set aside time and you practice being aware of those things. What happens over time as you practice those things is that that awareness starts to become innate in your life. So instead of you having to set aside time and be in a room with music and candles and quiet time to practice, you eventually start to transfer this innate reflexive ability to be aware in your day-to-day life. So the practice of mindfulness is amazing because it enhances our perception and our awareness of ourselves, off the meditation chair, off the yoga mat. So it's the whole goal of it is to put a gap or a pause between stimuli and response. So the stimuli that's coming at you and your response, your interpretation, and thus your response. And so mindfulness is really, really, really useful when we talk about reframing your mind, rather reframing your mindset, or your thoughts or your beliefs, let's call it. So that's the first step, is being able to have the awareness that the thoughts and beliefs that you do have are thoughts and beliefs that you don't want to have, right? The second step in the trifecta is acceptance, and you could also consider this to be acknowledgement. We're, as human beings, profoundly able to shift into denial. Denial is, it lives in all of us, and it's a useful tool for survival, actually. So in any way, shape, or form, our ego feels threatened or we feel threatened at some deeper level, denial can be a protective mechanism. So we can become aware of something within us and then, completely deny what we've become aware of. And so that's where acceptance comes into place. Like, okay, I'm having these thoughts about myself, or I'm aware of these thoughts. I acknowledge that I'm having these thoughts. So it's not just this awareness, like I'm sort of passively aware or even overtly aware. I'm aware and I acknowledge and accept that this is real. I'm not going to talk myself out of it. Oh no, these thoughts aren't real, or all I have to do is positively affirm my way out of this. No. I have awareness and I have acceptance that this is the current state of my mind. The adjustment phase is what we're going to talk about next. And that's how to start to target individual beliefs that are maladaptive, find evidence to dispute them, and separate the maladaptive belief from fact itself. So that's definitely what's on the docket next. So Albert Ellis's rational emotive therapy is it's part of the CBT world. So in psychology, under the umbrella of psychoanalysis, which was originally created and birthed by Freud, there's a lot of different thinkers and leaders and therapists and psychotherapists and so on and so forth. And Albert Ellis he's in the field of psychoanalysis and looking deeper into one's psychodynamics. So unconscious mind and thinking patterns and beliefs, essentially, and how that relates to behavior. So his tool, his ABC tool, is essentially a tool to separate maladaptive beliefs from fact and seek evidence so that you can dispute the maladaptive belief and essentially change it. So I'm going to quickly review what it is, and then we'll talk about how we can apply it in our own life. So A in ABC is for adversity. So A stands for an adverse event that happens in your life that essentially acts as a trigger for you. That trigger then forms a belief. That's B. So A creates B. an adversity creates a belief. And then those beliefs around the event lead to consequences in your life. So A, B, C. Pretty simple, right? Just to kind of comprehend it. The interesting thing about B is that the belief itself isn't around the event. It's not necessarily like what objectively happened to you that you form the belief around. It's about sorry, I said that wrong. The beliefs are not formed necessarily about the adversity itself or about the event itself. It's formed around how you interpret it. And again, I just want to point out, interpretation doesn't always happen by choice. It can sometimes happen unconsciously, and it can sometimes happen because the interpretation is rooted to an earlier trauma that causes us to see through that traumatic lens when we're interpreting the event. So that's what's interesting about beliefs is there's objective events that happen, and how the person interprets that event is what constitutes the consequence. But it's very important that you understand, I'm not saying that the interpretation itself is a matter of choice, because it's not always a matter of choice. And that's why you can have two people who potentially experienced a car accident and one person is traumatized and the other person isn't, because it's not the objective event that traumatizes the people. It's how they process it at an unconscious level. And obviously prior trauma, plays a role in how they will process that. So adversity leads to beliefs. Beliefs leads to consequences. And those consequences can vary from really, really bad depression and anxiety and mental illness to, even something maybe not as severe, something where you just maybe snarky every day and people don't like you. I mean, I think that's actually pretty severe too. If you're in a situation in life where you can't be pleasant, not a people pleaser, but just kind to people, I feel like that's actually a great measuring stick in terms of how well you are mentally. Like if you don't have the ability to be kind because you're too stressed or overwhelmed, it's time to look at your situation and see how you can change your situation so that you can be a better person, because not being able to be kind is going to destroy your life eventually. So consequences can range from, something minor to more severe mental illness. And so Ellis's theory, he adds D and E after the ABCs. And that is where the change happens. And so I'm going to review those. D stands for actively disputing the belief. So actively disputing B so that we can change the consequences, right? E is to, once we dispute the belief, E is to find a more effective belief. And so I'm gonna give an example of all of this so you can see how this works, because I know that I'm just describing the theory right now. And if anyone else who's watching tonight wants to type in the chat, if you feel inspired and brave, you want to type in the chat, a maladaptive belief that you're working through or that you're having trouble with. I'd be happy to workshop that so that you can kind of see how this works. But if I don't hear from anyone in the next 10 seconds, 9, 8, then I'll just give my own example so you can see how it works. Going once, gonna take a sip of water, going twice. Gives you guys a little break from my voice anyway. Okay, so I'm inspired. Okay, for some reason I can't view the comment fully. It's because it's hidden behind a logo. I'm inspired. This is excellent. Oh, great. If you wanna type in a maladaptive belief, I'd be happy to workshop it. I can also do that after I workshop the example that I have, but I just don't want to keep people waiting who are watching at home. So, okay, let's break this down with the inner critic and see how this can work. Okay, I'll use myself as an example. I, as Janey Brown, used to struggle a lot in my performance career with perfectionism. I used to believe that if I didn't get on stage and nail every single note as if like it's, as if it sounded just like the recording. Like that was kind of my expectation. It's like, if I don't make it sound just like this, essentially I've failed the performance. I've, not done my job. To me too, it didn't matter at all if people, said it was great. To me, if I didn't nail every single trill, then I was a failure. Alex says, I'm figuring out how to comment. I think she says, man, I need to get rid of this logo because it's hiding the comments from you guys. I wonder if I can take it off right now. Ah, yes, I took it off in the live stream. That's perfect. So she said, I just figured out how to comment. That's awesome. I love that. That makes me very happy. So yeah, if you guys want to workshop your beliefs, just holla, but I'll just keep going until then. So yeah, my belief was like, if I don't nail like every single note, I suck essentially, and I'm a failure and I've failed. And the thing with the thing with failing, and this kind of reflects the belief that I mentioned before, how the belief isn't formed around the event itself. It's actually just formed around how you feel about it and how you've interpreted it, whether unconsciously or consciously. Very similar to failure. Failure doesn't feel so shitty because we failed. It feels shitty because of how we're perceived when we fail and the shame that comes up when we fail. So it's not the failure itself that sucks necessarily. It's how we feel about that failure. So for me, being a failure meant no one would love me. Like I was unlovable. So you can see how beliefs have layers to them, right? Like if I'm not perfect, then I suck at my craft. If I suck at my craft, no one will love me. I'm unlovable because I'm unlovable. And the unlovable piece is like, I attached my lovableness to how well I was able to entertain. And it was weird because even when people were like, you entertain me, I was like, no, I sucked. So the belief around me entertaining was my standard and my standard alone. If I didn't hit that, forget it. So, okay, I had this maladaptive belief to workshop that, right? That's the inner critic. That's the voice of self-doubt saying like, you suck. You just blew that vocal trill, your life is over. So the maladaptive belief came from the event of, let's say, me not hitting the note as perfectly as I wanted to. The consequence of that is me walking around feeling like I'm unlovable, feeling like I don't deserve people's time, feeling like I'm not enough, right? Yeah, the inner critic's a beauty, by the way. It comes up with all kinds of just horrible messages about you. One of my friends who's also a performer said to me once, like, no critic could ever say, worse things than I've already said about myself. And I think that's really true for a lot of people. So how would we change this maladaptive belief? Well, the root problem with it is, if I'm not perfect with my notes or with my song, I suck. If I suck, no one will like me. If no one likes me, I'm unlovable, basically. Okay, so it's the root cause, the root belief is I'm unlovable because I wasn't perfect. I'm unlovable if I'm not perfect, or I'm unlovable because I wasn't perfect. So this is where mindfulness comes into play and awareness. If we have enough awareness to catch that belief, right? Oh, that belief, like I'm aware of the fact that I believe that I'm unlovable if I'm not perfect. Because like I said, a lot of these beliefs are happening at an unconscious level. And if they are, then they're just going to keep happening until you become aware of them and start to change them, right? So you have enough awareness to say, or let's say I had enough awareness to say, I'm seeing that I'm having this thought, I'm unlovable because I'm imperfect, not perfect. Now, how you would go about that, disputing that, is to ask the question, is that true? And then collect evidence against it. So for example, while Shauna, tripped and fell on stage, and in my definition, that's pretty imperfect, and everybody still loves her. So is it really true that I will be unlovable if I'm unperfect because she was unperfect and she was still lovable. Well, that doesn't fix the problem because that's Shauna. She's some, I'm an anomaly somehow. I'm this a one of a kind that I'm the only person that if I'm imperfect, I'm unlovable. So Shauna doesn't matter. Okay, so that dispute didn't work out. Okay, but what about the fact that, 2 months ago, I also screwed up my set and, I got a whole bunch of hugs from everyone after. Okay. That's maybe a little better, but what if they're lying? I don't know if I believe them. I don't know if, they're just trying to make me feel better. Okay, let me find more evidence. See, so I'm already feeling a little better because people gave me a bunch of hugs after I messed up my set, which means that they accept me and love me and means I'm lovable to an extent if they're not trying to make me feel good, right? Okay, let me go further. Let me dig further. Well, look at all the people still in my life. Like, look at all the friends that want to hang out with me. Look at all the people that love me and tell me they love me. Look at the family members who want to see me. Look at, the friends who want to have like if you keep trying as you dig for your evidence to combat the negative belief, you will find supporting evidence for the opposite of the belief. Like you will find evidence that negates the belief. I think the biggest problem is if you find evidence that doesn't hold up and then you give up and you say, well, because Shauna tripped and fell, well, it's just me that no one likes if I'm imperfect. So, I guess I can't change the belief. No. If you keep digging, if you keep looking for evidence, you will eventually find evidence that disputes this belief about yourself. That was a little bit of a juvenile example because I kind of said that when I was a child, I was a perfectionist and I had this really strong belief that I was only going to be loved if I was perfect, especially on stage. Like that was my measuring stick. However, as much as that was a childhood belief, it was a belief in my adult years as well, and took me many, many years to like let go of my need to be like supremely perfect vocally on stage. It took many years before I was like, oh, I can just be off key and it's just like fucking okay. Like, but not only that, like that belief has shown up in other ways. If 0 people show up on my live tonight, like what does that mean, right? Like, and here I am, I'm an adult now. So even though I gave like a bit of a juvenile example because I attached it to my childhood, like that belief can still come through at any time, and it does in different ways. So once you find, something that disputes your negative belief, the idea is to come up with a more effective one. Potentially in this example where I gave, if I'm imperfect, I will be unloved. Potentially a more effective belief than that. Once I've collected the evidence to say, well, wait, I'm not unloved and I was imperfect. And, a contending belief would be, well, what is perfect? Like, first of all, perfection doesn't exist and, kind of isn't realistic as a human being to ever be perfect. So let me just not even strive for that anymore. But I guess another way to approach it or to form another way to form your belief is, well, maybe if I love me, if I'm imperfect, does the rest matter? Maybe if I accept me, if I'm imperfect, again, whatever imperfect means, then can it still be true that I'm unlovable if I'm perfect? Like if I love me, if I love me and I decide to accept myself and embrace myself for all my flaws and all my fears and all my imperfections, then can that belief really be true anymore? And logically, the answer is no. like, that's objectively now true, that if I'm imperfect, I'm unlovable. It's objectively true that that belief is not true. When you decide, right, in this context, when you decide or I decide, I'm going to decide to accept and love myself if I'm imperfect. Now that I'm unlovable if I'm imperfect belief can't be true. There's no logical way for that to be valid or true. And that's just one example. There's so many other ways that we can dissect beliefs and reframe beliefs. But as you can see, the reframing process is not bippity boppity boop, right? It's not like, oh, I see the negative belief I'm having, I'm just going to choose a different belief. It can be that if the belief isn't connected to something really, really deep in you. If the belief is connected to a traumatic experience or just a belief that you've been having all the live long way since you were a kid, then reframing at the snap of your finger, it's not going to happen. And we really need to be cautious of that as we approach this reframing subject in the wellness field. And I'm just going to read some comments. Alex said, I realize people don't see my mistakes as much as I see them. Yeah, that's 100% true. 100% true. I remember the first time that I heard myself on record recording, and first of all, I hated my voice. And actually, I've learned now in my older years that it's actually it's so common for people to hate their voice when they first hear their voice for the first time on a recording that there's a name for it. It's called vocal confrontation. And it's your expectations of your own voice don't meet the reality because you're hearing your voice differently in between your ears than when it's projected and recorded. Anyway, so it's super normal. But I remember when I first heard my voice, I hated it. I was like, I'm literally a terrible singer. And it was just a complete self-deprecation, just so disappointed, so sad. Like my life is over. So is my career. And I was whatever, 13 at the time. But yeah, it was a problem. But if I were to hear that now as a trained ear, I probably wouldn't have heard it the way I heard it as a kid because I was picking up on every single little detail and I was also comparing it to my expectations. So not only do people not see the mistakes that we make because they're not really, they don't necessarily have the game plan in front of them and measure that and go, oh, this was what they were supposed to say, but they said that instead. Not only do people not do that, but they also don't have the same expectations that you have. And if they do, they'll probably never tell you. So it's okay. Ryan Brown says, I was told to love my enemies, so I will learn to love myself. That's super powerful. Super powerful. Alex says, exactly. It's not always bippity boppity boop. To say it's easy can be harmful to someone who is in the process of reframing. Totally. What really gets me about sort of the narrative around reframing right now is that when you, as the person advising someone to reframe, shares your opinion with them, and it's okay, you're trying to get over a breakup, and the person's like, well, all you got to do is reframe your mind around the person that you're trying to get over. It's first of all, as we know, it's not that easy. Relational context can have trauma interwoven into it. But even if it doesn't, it's just so complex. Relationships are so complex. So yeah, it's not as easy as reframing in that sense, especially if it's been a long-term relationship. But second of all, it's when that advice comes through, it sort of implicates that you yourself hadn't thought of that. And if so it's okay, yeah, thanks, tips. I didn't think about maybe that being the answer already, and I just am struggling with it. Then on top of it, it sort of also implies, even if they're aware that that's an option for you, that and they know that it's an option for you, and they're still giving that advice, it sort of implies that you're somehow choosing not to move beyond the negative belief. And again, as I mentioned earlier, transduction at a neurological level, that's happening unconsciously at our own, not on our own will. And then the way we perceive that sometimes is also not by choice. But even when we're fully aware of how we've interpreted a situation and we know that it's maladaptive and we like want to change it, sometimes it just takes time. Forgiveness, letting go of resentment, adjusting beliefs that have been long-standing, adjusting the way we see the world through a traumatic lens. All of that takes time. And we really have to be compassionate with ourselves in that process, because it's just not like we really love speedy things in this world, fast technology, fast recovery, just fast, easy, sort of like, yeah, just let me get there quicker. And healing doesn't work like that. So, and then Alex said, when I first heard tour voice, I think you mean, I don't want to assume, but I think you mean my voice. When I first heard your voice, I cried because it tugged at all my heartstrings. Well, good thing I didn't let these maladaptive beliefs hold me back. Otherwise, I never would have made it as a professional singer. That would have sucked, I guess. So that's the other thing, right? Like not to be, I'm cautious when I say things like this, but I also think it can be helpful. When we have these negative beliefs, and they hold us back, we're not just holding ourselves back from experiencing the world to its fullest and getting joy out of life. We're also holding others back from our gifts. If I had believed that every single time, well, I was going to say, I kind of did believe that every single time I stepped on stage, I had to be perfect. And to a degree, I still have pretty high standards. But if I had stopped, let's say, after the perceived failures of imperfection that I had, then I wouldn't have any music in the world at all today. There'd be no Janey Brown music online. And some of you have told me you really like that music. So that would suck for you. And so just think about that for yourself too. Like whatever it is that you're offering the world, the world needs it and it needs you. And if you're struggling, then you can't serve anybody. And it's also okay to struggle, and it's also okay not to serve anybody, and take time for yourself and, just be rather than do. But it's just to see both sides of the equation, like that you matter and you deserve to be well, and you deserve to have beliefs that support you and an inner coach that supports you rather than an inner trash talker that drags you. So that's what this entire session is about today. And I hope that, I hope that this is useful to you. It's certainly been useful to me, and to many other people that I know. But I really, I want to finish it off, especially if there's any more comments and thoughts and questions. And if you want me to work through another ABC with a maladaptive belief, I'm happy to do that as well. But I really want to leave the session off by just encouraging you to be compassionate with yourself. As I said, reframing can take time depending on what the beliefs are rooted in. If the beliefs are surface beliefs, then maybe they can change quickly. As I mentioned before, if you're in a high stress situation and you don't have time to reframe, sometimes positive affirmations can help. Like if you're about to step on stage or go into surgery or take a test, or, if you're having suicidal thoughts, you don't necessarily have time to collect evidence. You sort of just have to sometimes make the decision, I belong here on earth, right? So sometimes positive affirmations can be helpful, but in almost every other context that I can think of, positive affirmations and fast reframing don't work. And so we have to go through these processes of finding awareness for our beliefs, accepting and acknowledging that those are real beliefs that we're having. Like don't shift into denial and escape, the evidence and the data that you found with your awareness. And then going through the process of adjusting. And this example and this tool, the ABC example, is super useful to help you start to combat these deep, sort of long-standing beliefs that take time. But have compassion for yourself, and especially if people are suggesting to you that like you should be over this by now, or like all it takes is for you to do X, Y, and Z, and that'll reframe your mindset. Like, try to remember that they're probably coming from a good place, a place of wanting you to feel better because they love you. But it is also okay to say, when you say things like that, it makes me feel weak. Like somehow, because I can't change the belief super quick, like I'm weaker or there's something wrong with me. And so like, would you mind just like being patient with me? Like, this is just something it's just part of my core issues, and it's just going to take time, maybe a lifetime, like what I don't need is your advice. What I do need is your compassion and your presence. Like, just a really good way to ask for your needs to be met in the relationships with your loved ones, because sometimes they don't know how to give you what you need because they don't even know what you need. And that's true for all of us. So have compassion with yourself. Don't try to heal faster necessarily. I also encourage you to, approach your healing and approach your mindset reframing in a titrated manner. So in the trauma field, we use the word titration a lot, and that could potentially be a whole other, it could be a whole other webinar. And, if you guys are interested, maybe I'll talk about that next time. But titration is this concept of slowly integrating the awareness of your pain and your trauma and your maladaptive beliefs, slowly integrating that into your awareness and slowly working with it one little bit at a time. Sometimes we have these awarenesses about ourselves, or we discover something about ourselves, and it's too much. Like, sometimes we do need to shift back into denial and put that on the shelf for a bit and come back to it later. But do come back to it later. But it's just to say, like, we have to be respectful with our process. Like, again, our tendency to sort of like be productive, see tangible progress, heal faster, get over it, right? Like, that can cause us to sort of it can cause us to just go through the process too fast, and it becomes overwhelming, and it's like too much pain, too much, you're facing too many demons at once is what I'm trying to say. So be respectful of your process, have compassion for yourself. Let me know what you guys want me to talk about next time. Feel free to comment in the comments below. If you're watching this video after the fact, or DM me if you're on Facebook. I don't always get to my messages super fast, so probably better for the comments, because I see the comments and the public stuff faster. And if you guys are interested, I would love for you to check out my program that I have online. It's a 7-week emotional intelligence course to build confidence and manage mental health. And it's the brunt of the material is 6 weeks. It's not a huge time commitment at all, but the information is very powerful, and it completely changed my life when I started to implement it in my life after a lot of therapy and learning a lot about psychology and trauma. So yeah, definitely go check out my program. I'll leave it in the caption or the links or wherever I'm posting this, because it's going to be in a few different places. I will definitely provide the link for you to check out. Thank you, Alex. Would love to hear more about integration and what that process can look like. Yeah, that's a big, it's a big subject. And I feel like it's not really discussed a lot these days. There's a lot of, a lot of doing, and you and I, Al, have talked about this before, like, constantly, incessantly doing. We're sort of treating our healing process the same as like our careers in a sense at times. Like, okay, I got to meet this objective and crush this task and like get this meeting through and like go. And with healing, not only is that approach not useful because you can overwhelm yourself, because you could actually just re-trigger your trauma response, like, or create a new trauma response to you inundating yourself with, looking at the past, too frequently or whatever. So it can create a new trauma response as well as just overwhelm you. But it also doesn't necessarily like heal you any faster. And it's tough because healing It's not like these benchmarks or these medals that we get. It's not like, people can see how many likes we get for the therapy session that we did today. Like, not to say that that's everyone's motive, but it's just to say, like, we as humans like reward. We like tangible progress. We like to see, how far we've come and that we are productive and progressive. And, it's really hard to find that with healing. So, there's a tendency to overdo it with healing and like, okay, let me face all my demons at once and do ayahuasca by myself in a jungle in a different country with no one that I know. Like, anyway, we won't get into that. Ayahuasca, do you? I'm not saying I'm for it or against it. I'm just saying, like, just be respectful of how much you take on, and be compassionate with yourself, because then you can be compassionate with others. And that kind of circles back to something I mentioned earlier about if you're not able to be kind, like if you're finding in your life you're snarky and you're short-tempered and your reactions, like sometimes you're going to find in life, like all the mindfulness work that you did actually did make you more perceptive and more aware of your emotional and physical and mental dispositions. And yet you still react anyway. Like you're still not able to stop yourself. And I think that, it's just something to think about. Like if you're not able to stop your reactions and you're not able to be kind, there's something to consider there. Like, do you need to change your life? Is your job just not the right job for you? Is it too much for you? If you can't manage your situation and be kind, like, I think it's time to double check your situation. And if you're not able to be kind, it's potentially because you're not able to be kind to yourself. So that's why I say be compassionate to yourself, be kind to yourself, so that you can get the most out of life. Kindness is everything. Al says, healing as a career is not always helpful, and I have found can become a bit of an addiction. Yeah, that's big. That's super, super, super big. I agree too. Like anything that we can use can be abused, whether it's healthy or whether it's not healthy. Any exercise, nutrition, anything that we can use, we can misuse or abuse. So Jay's on here. He says it all starts with ourselves. Got to love ourselves first. Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's a crazy world, man. Like what's happening just all around. And sometimes I go on these rabbit holes and I'm just like, God, like the corruption is oceans deep. And like, how can I ever find my way through to the other side to make a difference? And Jay, like for me, it always comes back to, I start with me. Like that's the only control I have is to start with me. And Al and I have also talked about this on we did a workshop on this once, which was super powerful. And I think we should actually do it again. And that was like the ability to find compassion for yourself first so that you can then serve your community. Like there's this call, of course, to serve the community, serve others. And I'm a huge believer in that. I think that's what gives purpose to life. But not to say that it gives you your worth or you your value. It's just to say it can give you personal sense of purpose. But like, how can you show up for your community and be a good Samaritan if like you're just struggling? You're not loving yourself, or you're exhausted, or you're inundated with traumatic flashbacks because you went to 6 therapy sessions that week, which, doesn't seem like that makes sense. I don't want to judge anyone's process. If that's, some people do need 6 therapy sessions a week for whatever context. Like that can be a real thing too. It's just to say like, if you're doing that every day of your life, it's something just to look at, right? Like not to judge, just to be aware of, and then see if it makes sense and if it's actually contributing to your health. Jay says, exactly. We can only control how we react and feel. We can't control how others will feel or think, but we can put our positive energy out there. Yeah, for sure. We can't control how others will think. That's one thing that's predictable about people. It's a guarantee about people is that they're always going to be unpredictable. People are always going to be people, and they're unpredictable. So we can only control ourselves and rely on being good people all around. So I really appreciate your guys' comments. They're so useful, and it gives me feedback too on like what you're retaining and, you know, what's resonating with you. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, this has been fun. I think that this has been a good conversation for tonight. I won't get into any other subjects because we all know how I can like get going on a subject and then here we are 15 minutes later. But you guys have been awesome. Again, in the comments below at any time, just let me know what you're interested in, learning about and talking about, and you know, even to the right down to like what time of day is ideal for you to watch lives. And you know, I want to know all these things. I want to serve you. I want to contribute. So let me know. And thanks for showing up, you guys. And love you too, Alex. And Jay, you have dope energy. I'm usually, when I'm doing Love Through Fear episodes with Alex, we usually do this together. So I'm imagining her doing this right now. And I can see her little red heart. Love you guys. We'll see you soon.